Hello my friends, welcome to another episode of Puckstruck. I am your host Frank Crupi, aka the Hockey Illuminati, and today we are breaking down one of hockey's most loved, hated, and made fun of teams, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have the NHL's longest championship drought at 53 years. But is it really their fault? Let's dive in. So the Maple Leafs are kind of like the New York Jets of the NHL. Both play in their respective leagues' biggest markets, have huge loyal fan bases, and neither have won a championship since the late 60s. Similar to the New York Jets, the sports world kind of likes to poke fun at the Maple Leafs. After all, Toronto hasn't even reached the finals since 1967 and haven't won a playoff series since 2004. Not to mention the last time a Maple Leaf player led the league in overall scoring was 1938. And the last time a Maple Leaf player won a regular season MVP was 1955. And yes, this is the same team I'm talking about that has regularly sold out its home games since the dawn of time and also charges $50 to park outside the rink. Okay, but are the Maple Leafs really a laughingstock? After all, their nickname is the Maple Laughs. Or have they just been extremely unfortunate and derailed by poor ownership over the years? Heading into the 1968 season, the Maple Leafs had won 13 Stanley Cups, and 4 of the last 6 overall. At this time, minority owner Harold Ballard bought out his partners and took over full majority ownership of the Maple Leafs. By the way, it was around the same time Harold Ballard was convicted of tax evasion and would do time in jail. Under the micromanagement of new majority owner Harold Ballard, the focus right away was no longer on winning championships, but making money. Ballard was quoted in saying, "All I'm interested in is making dough. A winning hockey team is secondary unless fans stop buying tickets." Ballard basically took advantage of Toronto's diehard fan base and quickly sent the team into a downward spiral. Ballard's first move? Selling the Maple Leafs farm team for cash. This guy, all he cared about was money. Ads went up all over the rink, he put white player lettering on white jerseys to help with program sales, and when the roof of the rink started leaking, he didn't get it fixed, he just ordered plastic sheets to catch the water. Ballard was so cheap his wife got seeds instead of flowers on Valentine's Day. The next 20 years saw Ballard make horrible personnel moves. He fought with players over bonus money and traded away star players because he wouldn't pony up the money to keep them. Despite all of this, the Leafs were still okay in the 1970s, making the playoffs 8 times, but always with an early exit. Nothing was done to get them over the hump. For example, they could have kept Hall of Fame goalie Bernie Parent, but let him go over $20,000. Parent then went on to become playoff MVP of Philadelphia's 2 Cup championships shortly after leaving Toronto. Maybe that could have been the Leafs he was backstopping to those Stanley Cups. The 1980s got worse. Captain Daryl Sittler, who holds the record for most points in a single game with 10, got the DeAndre Hopkins treatment and was traded for nothing. The same thing happened to Lanny McDonald, who went on to captain Calgary to their first Stanley Cup. How could anyone possibly win a championship with the owner sabotaging the team like this? 20 plus years of Maple Leaf hockey were essentially pissed away. But in the early 90s, Harold Ballard passed away and new ownership took over. Ownership that actually cared about winning championships. They made some big trades, signed some key players, and it reaped immediate benefits. The Maple Leafs very quickly became contenders and made back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals appearances in 93-94. And if not for one of the biggest blown calls in sports history, Toronto would have made the Stanley Cup Final in 1993. With the Maple Leafs up 3-2 against Wayne Gretzky's LA Kings, Game 6 went into overtime when Wayne Gretzky high-sticked Doug Gilmour, drawing blood. This should have resulted in a 5-minute penalty for Gretzky, but because it was a great one, referee Kerry Fraser let it slide. A few moments later, instead of the Leafs being on a power play, Gretzky, who should have been in the penalty box, scored the game-winning goal. For an encore, Gretzky had a hat-trick in Game 7 and sent the Leafs home. If there are any New Orleans Saints fans watching this video right now, you can surely sympathize.
Quick snap, Breeze. Pass is incomplete, no flag.
Toronto fell victim to one of the worst no calls in sports history that year, and similar to the Saints, they would have had an excellent chance at winning the championship that year had they reached the finals. In 1999, the Leafs made it back to the conference finals against the Buffalo Sabres, but lost as they struggled to beat Hall of Fame goaltender Dominik Hasek. Then in 2002, the Leafs again made it back to the conference finals, but this time lost to the Carolina Hurricanes. It was the lowest scoring 6-game playoff series in NHL history. 3 games went into overtime, and all but 1 game was decided by 1 goal. Talk about a coin flip. So that's 4 Eastern Conference Finals appearances in the 10 years new ownership immediately took over for Ballard. If not for a Wayne Gretzky high stick and a couple of bad bounces, the Leafs probably make a few finals appearances in this era. Then came the salary cap era after the 2004 lockout, and the Leafs really struggled. But was it entirely their fault? You see, management had gotten used to taking advantage of the Leafs' deep pockets to build a team, but that wasn't going to work anymore in the salary cap era. Scouting and drafting was more important than ever, and that's something traditionally the Leafs hadn't put a lot of emphasis on over the years. They would just use the bottomless pit of money to lure free agents and plug holes. The Leafs stumbled out of the gate in this new era of managing teams and went through a tough transition period that didn't see them back in the playoffs until 2013. This was the year that in round 1, Toronto infamously blew a 4-1 lead to the Boston Bruins with 10 minutes left in the third period of Game 7. And I don't care what anyone says, but there's a little element of luck that comes into play when you erase a 4-1 lead with 10 minutes left in the game. For instance, Matt Fratton had a chance to make it 5-2 with 3.5 minutes left in the game on a breakaway. This would have iced it. The Bruins made the Stanley Cup final that year and lost to Chicago on a goal in the final seconds of Game 6. So could the Leafs have marched to the finals if not for blowing that lead? The chances were good because the East was weak that year. Boston only lost one game in rounds 2 and 3 combined after beating Toronto. The Maple Leafs have been in the playoffs for the past 3 years, which has included 2 more tightly contested Game 7 losses to Boston. The most recent in 2019 saw the Leafs blow a 3-2 series lead in round 1. Boston would then march to the finals, only to lose to St. Louis in Game 7. Again, could that have been yet another blown opportunity for Toronto to reach the finals? Possibly. The East was weak once again this year. Boston only lost 2 games total in rounds 2 and 3. Okay, so quick review. The Maple Leafs win 13 Stanley Cups. Then Harold Ballard takes over and the team slowly starts declining over the next 20 years as more emphasis is put on dollars instead of winning. Exit Harold Ballard, and all of a sudden the Leafs make 4 conference finals appearances in the next 10 years. And if not for a Gretzky high stick and a couple of bad balances, the Leafs probably make a finals appearance or 2 in this decade. And finally, the last handful of their most recent playoff defeats have narrowly come to the Boston Bruins, a team that would go on to represent the Eastern Conference and almost win the Cup in both those years. Again, if the Leafs are on the right end of a coin flip, maybe they make a finals appearance in this decade. Okay, I know there have been a lot of Maple Leaf what-ifs and could-haves in this rant, but at least you now can reflect on this. Do the Maple Leafs really deserve all the jabs they get from the sports world for not having won a cup in the past 53 years? Or have they just been victims of a greedy owner and cruel hockey gods? You decide. I'm Frank Crupi, aka the Hockey Illuminati. Thanks for sticking with us to the very end, and we'll see you next week on another episode of Puck Struck.